Hey everyone, welcome back to Bleyl Dev. Today we're going to be going over Firebase Authentication and specifically utilizing a template that I made for Firebase Auth that uses the provider method to manage the state of the app. So let's get into it. Okay, so this is the template app that I've made. We have a main file which reads into an opening screen. The opening screen can direct the user to either a login page or a register page. And once they've handled authentication, it will send them on over to the home page. If the user by chance is already logged in, then we are going to send them straight through and just right to the home page. It's going to check the authenticated state. So the way we're going to handle this, there's a couple things that we need to do. You can see here that I've already imported all the libraries needed. I've already added my firebase.initialize app. And if I take a look at my pubspec.yaml, so you can see the different versions that I'm using right now, I've got the latest version of provider imported, as well as Firebase Auth and Core versions 1.0.1. It's important to note that when you're watching this video, these versions may have been updated. And if you use the latest versions, there may be some differences with your code, depending on if Firebase has deprecated or modified anything. So just keep that in mind, but we're going to kind of move forward with this. The reason I wanted to make a template for you all, just to get a lot of the busy work out of the way. Oftentimes it end up spending about an hour just setting up the root of the app with simple authentication flow. And I figured this repository and this template would be an easy way for you to utilize the provider method and to handle authentication really quickly. That way, all you need to worry about is setting up your Firebase dashboard and importing the proper plist files into your project for iOS and making the proper changes to your Android side to handle authentication as well. So I wanted to make it as simple as possible for you all. In this video, we are going to go over how to set up our provider, how to create our Firebase service, and how to utilize the methods in the service within our login, register, and homepage. So we're going to get started here in our FlutterFire Auth Service file. This file is going to handle managing the state of our authentication. It's going to be checking. We're going to have a stream that checks the current state of the user, and we're going to have several methods that can act upon the authenticated state to sign someone in, register somebody, sign them out, and in the future we can add on more methods associated with Firebase authentication. So I'm going to make a final value called that utilizes Firebase Auth, and we're going to call it Firebase Auth. Then I'm going to set up our service, and I'm going to say this.Firebase Auth. Okay, it's now been initialized. The next thing I want to do is set up that stream that I mentioned. We want to always have a stream that's checking to see the current state of our user. So it's going to check a Firebase Auth value, and it's going to check for ID token changes. Okay. And basically what this will do is, since it's a stream, it's always going to be checking it. Anytime that our Firebase Auth value, anytime that it senses any kind of change to that value, it'll call this method. And so if we use auth state changes somewhere else in our program, anytime that it senses a change, we can know, okay, check and see the current state of the user and send them through to a new page if they're authenticated at that point. Okay, and I'm going to shell out, I'm not going to do them yet. We're going to go handle some other things first, but I'm going to shell out the different methods that we're going to need to use. So the first one being sign out, and these are all going to be future methods. We're going to have another future, if I can spell future right, for sign in. And for now, each one of these are going to return a string. And the last one is sign up. Okay, so these are the three core methods that we're going to be using. And these are three methods that are essential for any application. There's some other ones we can make as well in the future, such as creating user details or information or whatever you want to call it, where we can add username, email, that sort of thing. But these are the three we're going to focus on in this video. The point is to set up basic authentication with the provider method. And speaking of, let's go on to our main.dart file. So as mentioned, I already have the Firebase initialize app added. So you're going to want to make sure you have widgets flutter binding, ensure initialized, and then await firebase.initialize app. All of that within your main method. That way, anytime we enter the application, we immediately initialize Firebase. Okay. Then down here, we're going to make sure we're returning a multi-provider object. And that way we can add in our providers as seen here in this little snippet. So we're going to have two providers that we're adding, both associated with our recently created Firebase Auth Service, or I guess it's called FlutterFire Auth Service. But we're going to have one be provider, and it's going to be of type FlutterFire Auth Service. Okay, and there we go. And we need to add a create method on that. So we're going to say create FlutterFire Auth Service Firebase Auth.instance. Okay. And okay, so we're creating that. We're creating this object, and we're passing it Firebase.instance, Firebase Auth.instance. So that will basically set this value to Firebase Auth.instance. Okay, and then that value can be used to check for ID token changes and whatnot. Back to our main, we have a second provider. Well, it's associated with the first. It's a stream provider. Create. This one will have context. And it's going to be context.read FlutterFire Auth Service .auth state changes. Oh, no, not that one. .auth state changes. And then I think, oh, I forgot a semicolon here. There we go. No, it's no longer mad. And then I believe, even though we don't need it, we need to say initial data for that warning to go away. Okay. Perfect. So our stream provider is set up. Okay. And that is all we need to do in terms of setting up the providers. So that's good to go. So let's now move on to our opening screen and take a look at what's going on there. Okay, so for our opening screen, we have a couple things going on here. We have basically a background image, and then we have a column that basically has two different values, a sign up button and a sign in button. And all they do for now is they route the user to the associated view. What we want to do though is right here, sorry, that was from debugging. What we're going to do is just inside of our widget build, before we return a scaffold, we're actually going to check the current state of the user, of that service, using the provider method. And then we're going to route them to the home page should they already be logged in. That way, if a user logged in a previous time, then they open up the app. Instead of returning this screen, we might potentially just route them through to a new page instead. So what we're going to do for that is we first need to set up our Firebase user object, and that's going to be equal to context.watch user. Okay. There we go. And then next, what we're going to do is we're going to have an if statement that basically says if Firebase user is not equal to null, then we want to, instead of returning that scaffold below with the buttons, we're instead going to return home view. And for debugging purposes, we could print something like user is already signed in. And if the user is null, then we know there's no current user signed in, and it will then proceed to return that scaffold instead. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to come back here to our FlutterFire Auth Service, and we are going to fill in the sign in and sign up methods. We're going to start with sign up, and this is going to take in 3 values. We're actually going to take in a value of email, password, both of these are strings, and then a build context. And I'm going to add a comma after the build context just to give it this neat formatting. Whenever you use a trailing comma in Flutter, it will pick up on it and format the text accordingly instead of making it one long line. Then inside our method, we're going to have a try catch statement. It's going to be pretty simple. We're just going to catch E, but actually, since this is Firebase we're working with, we can say on Firebase auth exception, catch E. So this will give us a little bit more detailed error. It won't just be any exception, it'll look specifically for Firebase authentication exceptions. And so we're going to say await Firebase auth, that object that we instantialized, which should be equal to Firebase auth.instance. And we're going to say create user with email and password. And then we pass email, we pass password. I think that's good. Put a trailing comma once again, just so it's a little bit more readable. Once we have done that, we are then going to, if anything was wrong with the email or password that was passed through, an exception will be thrown and it will skip over the next bit of code. However, if we do make it past here, then we know that it has successfully registered a user and logged them in. And so at that point, all we want to do is say navigator.push, and we're going to push our context along with material page route. And basically what we're doing is we're just routing the user through. Okay, and then material page route has a builder, which we'll take in context, and we'll send this to the home view. And to save a little bit of time, I'm going to return e.message, but then I'm going to copy this into our sign in method. Okay, and we're going to do something very similar with the sign up, and it's actually going to take the exact same parameters. So I'm going to copy this, paste it, our variables, but we're not creating a user, we're signing in with email and password instead. And that's the only difference, is that right there. And one more thing before we need to return success, because it's a string, it's expecting a string to be returned. Same thing down here, return success. Okay, those 2 methods are good to go. Very simple. And let's just go ahead and fill out the sign out method because it's just a one-liner anyways. But all we're doing here is saying await Firebase auth.sign out. Boom, done. And then let's see, I think it's expecting a string return. We just won't worry about that for now. We'll make it a void method. Okay, so that method is done. I'm getting a couple errors here. Okay. I do want that comma again. Readability, not a big deal, but to me, I like it to look a little bit cleaner. Okay, so now we can go on to our Firebase, or I'm sorry, we can go to our register and login screens. So let's go ahead with our register screen first. And we're looking right here for this material button. It says sign up, and we have an onPressed method. So right here is where we're going to want to call our sign up method in our service. And when you're working with the provider, the way you call those methods on the provider is you say context.read FlutterFire Auth Service. Then we put parentheses, and then we can call our method. So we're going to say sign up. And we're going to have 3 values here that we're going to add. We have our email, which is going to be email controller.text.trim. We have our password, which is going to be password controller.text.trim. And then we're going to have our context. Okay. And that's all we're going to need to do there. And now we're going to do something similar for our login screen. So same thing. Here we are. I've already got my provider and Firebase files imported. This is already set up. Email field, password field, and then a sign in button. So in the onPressed method, once again, context.read what we're reading, parentheses, sign in. Takes an email, takes a password, takes a context. Okay, we're good there. Last but not least, we have our sign out method, and this is found in our home.dart file. So this has nothing. It has a background, it has a text widget that says home view, and then we have an icon button with the exit to app icon. And all it's doing is popping the state, and then we are going to sign out the user. And so we do something similar here in that we say context.read FlutterFire Auth Service .signout. And we're going to make one last change to the home page, and that is this method right here. We don't want to call navigator.ofcontext.pop all of the time, only some of the time. Now let's explain. In our opening view, we simply return home view. So if the user is already signed in, it'll just return a home view widget. It won't return, like we haven't pushed any additional pages onto the navigator. So by saying navigator.pop, we'd be popping the initial view, and we don't want to do that. So what we're going to do instead is we are going to say if navigator.ofcontext.canPop navigator.ofcontext.pop. And what this will do is it'll only return true if we have other views that have already been pushed onto the stack. So if we haven't, it's still in that initial one, it's not going to enter here, and it'll just sign us out, and we'll be done. But if there are, then it will pop us back to those initial views that have been pushed on. And come to think of it, this may require a little bit more modifying of that opening view. It may be that instead of just returning that widget, we may need to push on another, push that widget onto the stack, onto the navigator stack. But that's something that we can handle on the side. That's not the intent of this video, but that's something to keep in mind if you want to take this further. And I'll probably make updates to the master branch to accommodate that in the future. And once again, keep in mind, I've already done all of the Firebase setup. If you're curious on how to do that, you can see some of my earlier FlutterFire videos. I did a series back in the fall, and I showed how to set everything up for Firebase there. This video is more to show you how to implement the provider with handling state in your application, and how to call the proper methods for signing in and signing out and that sort of thing. So if you're curious on how to set up your application for Firebase Authentication, on the Firebase dashboard, you can see those prior videos on how to do so. I also have Medium blog articles on how to do so. So this is our home screen, 2 buttons, sign up, sign in. Let's sign up. I'm going to say testuser@gmail.com. Give me a simple password of 1 through 6. Okay, user signed out. Now, what happens if I restart the app? It sends me straight in. If you'd like to practice this yourself, there's this branch nil Firebase on the repository. You can look at that, and it doesn't have any of the provider methods implemented. So you can practice setting all that up yourself. If you'd rather just get access to the full template, however, you can simply check out the main branch and you'll be able to get access to the complete template with code. I hope you all found this video useful. If you did, make sure you click that like button, subscribe to the channel for more weekly Flutter content. I'll catch you guys next time.